Okay, great. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming today, making time out of your schedules. And those of you, Carrie and Tony online, thank you for joining us as well. This is, going to turn in, I think, to kind of an annual refresher for the leadership of our boards and commissions, just so we're compliant with sunshine law, just so you all know the variety of things that are going on, and we can help manage a little bit staff resources. Because I'll probably say this more than once today. I found out yesterday they did a survey of all of the liaisons to boards and commissions. There are 60 different ongoing initiatives from boards and commissions that the city staff is dealing with right now. And so it's a really good problem to have, but it's also then becomes a management challenge for us. And so part of this is, educating everybody here on what our responsibilities are legally, but also part of it is thinking about how we can do meetings well, do projects well, and make sure that we're doing them in a way that doesn't have our staff want to quit every time they go to a board or commission meeting. So I thought we'd just take a minute. I mean, I think I know pretty much everybody in the room, but that doesn't mean everyone else does, and just do introductions. Would you let Lexi in? She's in the waiting room. And so, so they're just coming in there. So Tammy, I'm gonna start in the back row for a change. Would you mind just introducing yourself and starting us off?
Yeah,
And your board and commission as well, please.
Sure. My name is Tammy Bame. I own Maypop, and I'm the chair of the business development.
I'm Julia Lenig. I am the vice chair of the Business Development Commission. I'm also a member of the Crossroads Board, and my business is Descendant Boutique on Big Bend.
I'm Janice Seeley. I am vice chair of the Arts Commission.
I'm Fran Barbieri. I'm on the Personnel Advisory Board.
The most mysterious of all.
I'm Debbie Solberg. I'm the chairman of the Board of Adjustment.
I'm Carol Denke. I'm vice chair of Historic Preservation, and I'm also a member of the ARB.
Angela Thompson. I'm the chairperson for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Tracy Collins on the Architectural Review Board.
Anita Radcliffe, the Library Board President.
Leanne Law, also Library Board Vice Chair.
John Hickey, Vice Chair, Sustainability Commission.
Marie Peoples, City Manager.
My name is Neil Brentreger. I'm the city attorney. I've been a resident of Webster Grove since 1989. So I've been here for 35 years, and I'm pleased to be here. And I'm grateful for you all being here.
I'm Clark Hoteling. I'm chair of the Traffic Advisory Commission.
Ron Cook, Vice Chair of Old Webster Taxing District.
Right, and so how about to make it a little easier, we'll call on people online so you don't have to guess who's speaking. I'm just going to do it the way you appear in the boxes. Jeff, do you want to begin?
Hi, Jeff Tomich. I am Chair of Sustainability.
Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Coyne, Chair of the Green Space Advisory Commission.
Tony?
I'm Tony Hunt. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission.
And Lexi?
Lexi O'Brien, Chair of the Police Community Engagement Board.
And someone does not have their camera on, but that's okay. Jill, do you want to introduce yourself, or would you like to be anonymous at the moment?
No, I'm Jill Magruder. I am part of the Police Community Engagement Board with Lexi. And yep, sorry, I'm going to leave my camera off because I'm in a busy workplace setting.
That's fine. Thanks for being able to join us. So, and I am Laura Arnold. I'm the mayor of Webster Groves. So just as you all maybe know or don't know, in the city org chart, the boards and commissions are one of the things that really directly report to the city council. Almost all staff, minus the city manager, report to the city manager. And so that's a little bit of why I'm here leading this meeting, is you all really do function as advisory, and we'll get to this later, advisory groups for the city council. One of our most important legal responsibilities is to be in conjunction with the Sunshine Law for the state of Missouri. And so I'm going to let the lawyer in the room, or maybe more than one lawyer in the room, talk about that. So Neil, do you want to start with Sunshine Law?
I want to talk to you about chapter 610 of the revised statutes of the state of Missouri. 610 is what we commonly refer to as the Sunshine Law. And I want to start this conversation with what will be the conclusion of this conversation, which is that this law fosters accountability by making sure that everything that we do in the open. Nothing is done behind closed doors. And if you start with that concept, it will be easy to understand what it is that Sunshine does. We have two different components that you will be concerned with. One is open meetings, and we'll talk about what that means. And the other one is open records. Two different concepts. Again, same idea. And we want to make sure there's accountability. We want to make sure that things are there. If people want to see what it is that you as a board or commission have done, and you have in some way, shape, or form memorialized it, we want to make sure those things are there. When we have a meeting, we want to make sure that people know you're having a meeting, and we have that meeting in the open, in the sunshine. That's why we use that phrase sunshine, right? So again, that's why we do all of the things that we do. It's actually simple in its concept, but it can be difficult sometimes in its implementation. It's the nuances of the statute that can be problematic. And it is the subject of a great deal of litigation. I have litigated in the circuit courts, the appellate courts, and in the Supreme Court regarding sunshine law and its application. So again, it can get complicated. The idea here is the more we talk about it, the more you understand it, the less likely it is we ever find ourselves in that situation. So the sunshine law ensures that meetings, records, votes, and other official actions are open and accessible to the public. All right. Now, what is your responsibility in that regard? Your responsibility is to make sure that when you're having a meeting that's been posted, that's where staff comes in. So it's not your responsibility to post it. We will post, we being the city of Webster Groves, will post the meetings for you. The only thing we have to know is when it is you're going to have those meetings. When we post a meeting, that includes posting an agenda. So an agenda is going to be those things that you will talk about. In most instances, your agenda is not going to change. It's the items on the agenda that will change. So you'll talk about, so for instance, if you're the ARB, you're going to talk about various properties that are at issue before you. You're going to list the properties. You will notify people of that sort of thing. Again, it's all going to be out there. If I want to look and see what ARB is going to do, that I should be able to look at that and say, they're going to talk about this property or that property. If I'm looking at what the Board of Adjustment's doing, we will have, again, on a property basis, I'll be able to see what that is. Planning and zoning, we should be able to see what it is they're going to talk about, and the agenda should make it clear. Anytime we've got a simple formulaic agenda with no information on it, we probably haven't complied with sunshine. We want to know what it is you're going to talk about, not just there's going to be new business, there's going to be old business, there's going to be, again, perhaps a closed session. Those sorts of things, again, you can list them generally, but you really do want as much information on those agendas as you can possibly put on that agenda. It's a critical tool for promoting transparency in government and encouraging public trust in governance to make sure people know when you're meeting and what it is you're going to talk about. All right? Not complicated. Everybody understands that. For the open meetings, we have to have at least 24 hours of notice. Every time you're going to have a meeting, we have to have 24 hours notice. So we always want to make sure, you as a chair, want to make sure that we've posted 24 hours in advance in order to ensure that we can have that meeting. We can sometimes have a shorter notice if there is an emergency that presents itself. What sort of an emergency might that be? If we have a time issue that we have to meet, if there's a time crunch that somebody overlooked in some way, shape, or form, and we have to have that meeting, we still have to publish a notice, even if it's 24 hours, less than 24 hours. We simply, when we get into the meeting, we would simply say, here's why we're not conforming to that 24 hours notice rule. And again, we put it in the minutes. It's then typically a vote that would occur in that meeting to accept the fact that it's an emergency meeting, and it becomes some part of the minutes that anybody can see after that. Again, is it something that's going to be subject to review in and of itself? No, we just have to have an articulable reason as to why we're doing what we're doing in that regard. Okay. And so the open meetings, again, the agenda, what's on the agenda, that's something that gets published, and we archive those. We keep them forever. Okay. So if you want to know what we did in 2003, we can go back into the archives and we can tell you what the Board of Adjustment did in 2003. And we can look and see what their rulings were and what happened. Okay. So again, it's there. If people want to see it. The idea, again, is transparency and its accessibility. We make those things accessible. And most of those things are now accessible online. For the purposes of things like our council meetings, we actually record those. So if you didn't make a council meeting and you wanted to, you can actually go and look in our archived meeting minutes and you can see those recordings, which is something that the pandemic did for us. And frankly, that is new. That's been under Mayor Arnold and under Dr. Peoples' terms. We have brought the city into the 21st century, and we're now making sure that we again can not only record these meetings, but people can go back and look and see what was discussed and what the conversations were about. The second part is public records. Okay, so again, that's not something that you're going to have to really worry about, with one caveat: emails. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. Okay, so public records are going to be our minutes, obviously, from every meeting that we have. We're going to keep those minutes. We're going to publish those minutes. People can see them. People can read them. Typically, minutes don't get published until they've been approved. So every time you go to a meeting and say we're approving the minutes from the last meeting, at that point, we trigger then the publication of those minutes, and they then become a public record. Okay, people can see it. People can look at it. Now, that's easy. Again, that's not something that you as a chair will do, other than, again, to make sure that the minutes have come to you and that those minutes have been approved. Where it becomes problematic is emails. All right. So why is an email problematic? Well, let's say that you're getting ready for a Board of Adjustment hearing, and somebody says to another member, "Hey, what's your thought on 462 East Jackson?" This happens to be in my home. Okay. And somebody, because I'll have an application for a variance. And I did, and I had a wonderful experience, by the way, in front of the Board of Adjustment. And so there, somebody says in an email, "Hey, what's your thought on this particular application for a variance?" Now, again, that is a natural tendency to reach out to somebody before a meeting and get an idea of what people are thinking and what they might want to do on a particular application. The problem with that is if you are now deciding the issue. So if you reach out to one person and say, "Hey, I've got a question, can you answer this?" That's not going to be a problem. If you start to talk about how you're going to rule on a particular matter, that does become a problem. Now, when does conversation become a decision about what you're going to do? There's the nuance. There's the subjective part of this that's very, very hard to answer. So I would encourage you, again, if you have questions, if there's information that you're looking for, using email to do that is not an issue. Okay. However, if you want to be absolutely certain that you're not ever running afoul of the Sunshine Law, what you want to do is include one person on those emails, and that's Katie Nakazan. Katie is our city clerk. Katie would make sure if there's a question about ARB or Board of Adjustment or planning and zoning or whatever it is that your commission is, traffic, whatever it might be, she's going to make sure it gets to the right place. Okay. Now, do you need to do that with everything? No, you don't. Again, if it's, "Hey, what time is the meeting on Tuesday?" Or, you want to get together for a drink after the fact, that's not going to be a problem. But in conversations where you're talking about things of substance, and those emails might be shared with other members of the board, now you're starting to run into that place where, again, Sunshine is creating a really, really gray area for you. Why? I send one email that says, "Hey, what's your thought on this particular property?" That person says, "Here's my thought. I'm going to copy somebody else on this." It's gone now to a third person. Now the third person says, "Well, let's see what so-and-so is going to say in this." And now we've sent it to a fourth person. That might be a quorum. Now you've had a meeting. You didn't intend to, wasn't your purpose, but you maybe have had a meeting, maybe. Okay. So again, rather than get to that place, the safer thing to do is save those conversations for when you actually met in person, when you're at the meeting. If there's a question that you have about a procedural matter, that sort of thing, I would tell you that never gets into a realm of Sunshine. But when you're starting to talk about substance, now you've gotten into an area that you might be crossing over a line unintentionally. Now, when would that ever be an issue? Let's say, again, for those of our boards and commissions that are adjudicating certain issues, like ARB, like the historic board, like the Board of Adjustment, in a situation where somebody is going to seek an appeal that might go to the circuit court, under those circumstances, you might find yourself in a situation where somebody says, "Produce all the emails that would have gone back and forth between you and other members regarding this property in advance of the meeting." Now you've got a discovery order that most circuit courts are going to require you to produce that information. So again, even if you're using your own personal email, you might have to produce emails that you would have generated regarding that particular application. So again, it's something to think about. It's something to be aware of. It's not something to be afraid of. I don't say this because, there's something wrong in it. I say it because, again, if the idea is transparency, if the idea is accessibility, we want to make sure that these things are as transparent and as accessible as they can be. So I always tell people when they're writing emails or text messages, and that, by the way, can include text messaging, not just emails, okay? So when they're writing a text message or an email that. You're in the right place.
I
Tom,
think
sit
that
down.
means you have to save the tape.
Yeah.
I even saved you a seat.
Ew.
If you're sending out an email and a text, I always say, write them just like you would want them to be written when you're sitting in the witness stand reading them in a courtroom. All right, because the possibility always exists. Again, something to be afraid of? No. Again, it's just something to be aware of, that's all. Any questions about that part, by the way?
Now, I tend to only respond to my staff liaison, you know, I mean, we get emails like, are you gonna be there?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't even reply all to that.
Right.
I just say, you know, yeah, I am. And then that way,
Right, and that's safe. And I see that as, and again, if you're responding to staff, they're going to save that anyway. It'll be archived anyway. It's when you're not speaking to staff, if you're speaking to other commission members or board members, that's where it becomes a little bit more problematic. But if staff is reaching out to you, asking you a question, and you're responding to that, that's not a problem.
and I
We
can ask
archive
staff
that.
a substantive question about something
can't.
on the agenda as
You
well.
can't, you can't.
And that's not a problem.
That's not a problem. That's right. And again, because we're going to be archiving that, you could even include everybody on that email and say, hey, I've got this question, a substantive question, one way or another. Again, as long as you're not asking for a vote, and as long as you're sharing it with everyone, including a staff member who will archive that document. Okay?
John's got a question.
Yes.
So I wonder just how detailed this gets. Let's say I think we should talk about some topic at the meeting.
Mhm.
And I shoot an email to Jeff Tomich and say, hey, Jeff, can we talk about doing a tour of the Waste Management Inc. facility?
Mhm.
Did I just like cross a line?
No, and so what you're doing here is you're saying, hey, I'd like you to add something to the agenda. If you would send out an email to everybody saying, hey, I'd like to put this item on the agenda, how do you all feel about that? Now maybe you've taken a vote, okay? But if you're sending it to one person who might be controlling the agenda, and again, these are all going to be sort of fact-sensitive determinations, but if you're sending this out to someone saying, hey, can we put this on the agenda as a business item for the next meeting? Then in a situation like that, if that person is controlling the agenda and says, yeah, I'll add it, you've not crossed any lines, okay? And again, I want to be careful about this whole concept of crossing lines, because again, it makes it sound like you're doing something bad. You're not, okay? You're trying to do your job and you're trying to do it efficiently and effectively. The only thing we have to make sure is that we're doing it transparently. So efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency are really the important elements here, okay? So again, under a circumstance like that, I don't see a problem. But if you would have said, hey, I want to add this to the agenda, how's everybody feel about that? That's something you probably shouldn't do it in an email. That's something you should do at the next meeting, saying, hey, I want to put this on the agenda for the next meeting. How does everybody feel? Now you've recorded it, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It just seems to me there's so many permutations.
And there are, which is why I've litigated this in front of every court in the state, because there can be permutations. And there are some people who are sort of professional sunshine law violation seekers who like to litigate these issues. It's kind of become a cottage industry to see if you screw up. And again, where you really see these problems is in records, okay? In the open records aspect, not open meetings aspect, in the open records part of things. And again, the good news is that none of you are ever going to have to deal with those requests because you're not the record keepers, okay? The record keeper is the city itself. The record keeper is going to be Katie Nakazano, who's our city clerk, who is the records custodian. All requests for sunshine, by the way, procedurally, so you all know this, all requests for sunshine is supposed to go to the custodian of records. Now, does it have to be a written request? It does not. It can be an oral request. If you get an oral request, you should say to the person making the request, you need to do that with the custodian of records. I'm not the custodian of records, okay? You should pass them on. You should tell them where to go and tell them who that is. It's a city clerk. That's who you reach out to, okay? If you get an email, you should say, again, I'm forwarding this on to Katie Nakazano, but I'm not the custodian of records. This is who it needs to go to. Okay, so I know, for instance, planning and zoning has had situations where we've had records requests that have come to planning and zoning. Again, they're not the custodian of records. You guys don't have to answer those questions. When it goes to Katie, Katie knows more about the sunshine law than virtually anyone I've ever met, including myself. And again, Katie is sort of the first wall that people have to get over. And then, you know, again, if she's got issues, she and I will talk about it. But she almost always knows what the answer is one way or another. You guys don't have to worry. Okay? So you're never going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to create a problem in that regard. Okay. Any other questions on that topic? Is that, I mean, that's a real issue. Yes, I've got a hand up there. Jeff.
Yeah, I had a quick question on sustainability. At times we've done subcommittees, which may be no more than 2 members of the commission who might get together for coffee and talk about, you know, ideas for bike lanes or composting or something of that nature. Do those meetings need to be noticed?
No, if it's less than a quorum, it's not a meeting. So you have to have a quorum in order for that to happen, okay? Now, again, keep in mind, a quorum can be accomplished by daisy chaining in other people down the line. Hey, I met with so-and-so today. We talked about this issue. I'm going to send this out to somebody who's going to send it to somebody else. Now you've gotten to four members who are talking about brainstorming these issues. Again, in a situation like that, you have to be careful is what I'm saying. If the question is, hey, are we meeting next Tuesday? That's never going to be a problem. If the question is, hey, this is what I want to talk about. What are your thoughts on these issues? Again, that in my mind probably doesn't cross the line either, although you have to be careful there. If the question is, hey, what do you think about us doing this? What do you think about us, you know, establishing composting throughout the city? Yeah, I'm in favor of it. Yeah, so am I. That looks suspiciously like a vote. Okay, so again, you want to just do that openly. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Now, you go to a party and you've got more than a quorum at the party. Everybody's getting together and they're just going to talk about social things. Inevitably, things are going to come up. That's not going to be a problem either. Okay, so again, if you, however, say, hey, this is how I'm going to vote on Tuesday. What's your thought? If you want to say, you know what, this is really an interesting situation, and here are the things that I think were interesting, I don't have a problem with that. If you start to say, and here's where I'm going to go with this, now you're starting to get into a place where you're getting into gray areas. Again, I don't want to be hyper technical. Just avoid it. Just talk about those things when you're with people at the meetings.
So Jeff, one of the things that did happen during the course of the development of the sustainability plan, there were those subcommittees that met, and we went ahead and advertised them. So there's nothing that says, even if you're less than a quorum, if you want to be perfectly transparent as a commission, we can still advertise them and list them on the city calendar, even if they're not on site at City Hall as well.
Right. And normally these are 2 or 3 person groups, explicitly less than a quorum, but just people who may want to spend 90 minutes talking about composting without involving the entire commission and liaisons and spitball ideas with the knowledge that no one's going to make any decisions. Everything that they talk about is going to be brought to the commission for our full agenda meeting and talked about openly among all of us.
Yeah, and Jeff, if you've done it right, those subcommittees should be reflected in the minutes in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
We're forming a subcommittee to bring this information back. And this sort of goes to the general purpose that you have of subcommittees and your own commissions and boards. The whole idea is for you all to gather information in order to make informed decisions about the topics that are in front of you, right? So the use of subcommittees is not only not problematic, it's encouraged. You as a board or commission are doing exactly the same thing. You're having these meetings. We're relying upon your expertise, your experience, your educational background, all of those things. And the fact that you are invested in this community, we're relying upon all those things and asking you to bring information back to either staff or to city council. That's what boards and commissions do. That's your purpose. You know, we talk about public engagement. Boards and commissions are the purest form of public engagement. The idea here, because you're all citizens, you all are invested in this community, you're giving of your time. And again, it's those things like your experience, education, et cetera, that council is relying upon or staff is relying upon because they can't do it all. You know, as the mayor said, there's 29 boards and commissions, I think. Is that right?
No. Those were the ones consistent with the strategic plan. How many are there now? I want to say 13. I don't know why I want to say 13.
However many there are, those are things that the council can't do. I mean, they're volunteers too. So again, all of those things are very, very important. So coming back to your original question, whatever you do to delegate, whatever you do to sub it out, as long as it's reflected in your minutes, it gives me no heartburn whatsoever.
Good, John.
Yes, sir.
What is a quorum? What does it take to be a quorum?
The majority of whatever your number is. If you've got of 7 members, 4 is a quorum. If you got 5, 3 is a quorum. If you got 9, 5 is a quorum.
What about vacancies?
You still have to count towards the number that you have. So if you find yourself, if you're a board of 7, but you right now only have 6 people seated, you're going to require 4. Okay. So if you've got an even number, it becomes a little wonky, which is why you still fall back on the original number. Okay. So I'll finish up with this. Going back to this question of records and records requests. Records requests are, again, made to the custodian of records. All records are presumed to be open records, all right? Unless they fit into an exception to the sunshine disclosure. Chapter 610, section 021 sets out all of those exclusions. There's 23 of them, and there are a variety of different reasons. The easy ones are things like real estate negotiations, attorney-client communications, personnel questions, information involving personnel. So for instance, the personnel board, who are always going to have issues regarding personnel, are almost always going to have their records closed because we're dealing with personnel, right? The same would not be true of the Board of Adjustment. That's almost always going to be, in fact, it's always going to be an open record, one way or another. Same would be true with the Community Engagement Board, that sort of thing. So again, those are decisions, however, you don't have to make. When people do make record requests, we can charge for record requests. They can be, the statute says it has to be the hourly rate of the person least qualified to collect these records. So I can't charge the rate that we would charge if Dr. Peoples was gathering the records, or if I was gathering the records. I can charge, whatever the lowest paid clerk in the office might be getting paid. Now, again, the good news is Katie is the city clerk and she's pretty much the only city clerk. And so we get to bill out at her rate. Again, not your problem. That's something that gets dealt with. But again, the only thing we have to do when we get a record request is we have to look at it, decide whether it falls into one of the exceptions. Typically, we send out a letter that says within 3 days, you always have to respond saying we've got your request and we're processing the request. Then you have to respond within a reasonable period of time. Sometimes you refuse to give them records altogether. Other times you redact the records. So for instance, the Planning Commission right now has a situation where, if you've all been paying attention to the news, there have been people who want police reports regarding incidents that may have occurred at KVC and Children's Hospital. The problem with that is that by its very nature, it involves juveniles. Juveniles are protected under a separate section of the law, which says records involving juveniles are confidential. So Sunshine says in its exceptions, one of the things that Sunshine does not require us to do, and in fact, it specifically prohibits us from doing, is turning over confidential records. So we say in response to something like that, we have no records which are responsive to your request. Doesn't mean we have no records. It means we have no records which are responsive. All right. So again, there are those situations that we go through. It's not something that you have to worry about if you're on a commission where that issue has come up. Typically, I would come to your board or commission and say, this request has been made and here's how we're dealing with that. We'll make you aware of why we're doing what we're doing. All right. So again, the whole idea here is transparency. The whole idea here is to make sure that you are operating in the sunshine and making sure that people can see what's there. Best practices, I would encourage proactive disclosure, but if you have a question about disclosure, ask the question. Ask staff, they will come to me if I'm there, or another one of the lawyers who would be there, who typically will be my partners, who also might happen to be my sons. If they are at your board or commission, again, they'll have the answer for you one way or another. We'll talk about what gets disclosed and what does not.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am,
for you.
go ahead.
For a subcommittee, say there's 3 members working on some sort of proposal to bring before the council, and y'all advertise that. What would be our requirement to publish records or minutes of that?
So what you would do typically is, if you're going to have a proposal and you're going to submit that to council for one reason or another, the proposal is the record. Okay, so let's say you've gathered information, you've got records, documents that you've used in preparing that proposal. Are you obligated to save that information? I don't think that you are, the underlying documents. It's the proposal that is the record.
Okay, so what about the meeting of the subcommittee itself? Do
So-
they have to publish minutes of
No.
that meeting?
No, they're gonna come to you as your commission, and your subcommittee is gonna say, here's what we talked about, and it will be reflected in the minutes of the commission or the board. Okay. Okay. So we're not trying to make more work for you. Again, theoretically, in terms of the context we just described, the information that they have gathered and that they're presenting is going to be presented to the committee, who in turn would turn it over to council or to staff. Okay, so if it's reflected in your committee minutes, you've done everything you need to do. Okay. Having said that, questions? If you do have any questions in the future, don't hesitate. You can send it to your staff liaison or to your council liaison, and they will forward it on to me. I'm happy to answer. I'm here to answer questions. Okay, great. Thank you.
Neil, we're going to let you at least start the second agenda item, which is the advisory role of boards and commissions.
Okay.
And there's a distinction. Some of you serve on, well, I'll let you do that.
So there is a distinction, and the mayor is hitting the nail on the head. Okay. Your board, your commission is going to have a stated purpose. It's going to be found either in the charter or it's going to be found in the code. So in some instances, boards and commissions are identified in the charter, and then there's greater explanation in the code. Other boards and commissions are not described in the charter at all. They're simply found in the code. Okay. So depending upon what the purpose of your board or commission is, that will again dictate sort of where you fall in the scheme of things and what your purposes are. Some of you are going to be adjudicative, meaning that you are going to be like the Board of Adjustment. Okay. I've gone to planning and zoning and I want a permit for a particular job, and I don't fall within the zoning requirements. I don't meet the setback requirements, whatever it might be. I now, again, they've denied me the permit. I have a right of appeal. That appeal goes to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment is the final decision maker. Doesn't go to council after that. They're the final decision maker in those areas. Each board and each commission is going to have an ultimate purpose. Some of those purposes are not adjudicatory. Some of them are simply to make recommendations to council. Things like the Traffic Advisory Board is designed not to adjudicate or determine whether or not we have traffic issues. It's to make recommendations because they, as a matter of policy, have made a determination that, again, there's a problem in that regard. Looking at your code description or looking at your charter description will help you understand where you fall. And each of you is going to be a little bit different, okay? It's going to help you understand where you fall within the process itself. Now, go back to the comment that I made earlier. The whole idea behind boards and commissions is community engagement. The whole idea here is that council can't be everywhere and do everything. And so what they've done is they've delegated to you certain responsibilities to make certain recommendations to them. What you're going to always do is a recommendation, but for Board of Adjustment. Okay, they're a little different. All right. So what you're always going to do in these situations is you're going to be making a recommendation to the council to take certain action. You are the voice of the community. You are those people, again, based on your education, your experience, your background, your commitment to the community. You are the people that they are looking for to give a voice to the community about those issues that they think are the pressing issues. So that is very, very important to understand. It's not council's voice, it's yours. So again, we have liaisons that are there, both staff and council. They're there to assist you, to help you get the information that you need if you feel like you need additional information to do those sorts of things, but they're only there to assist. One of the things that would be the biggest mistake that I think you can make as a commission is to say, we're not sure what to do. Council liaison, what do you want us to do here? No, your voice is the voice that is the important voice. They'll have their vote. They want to hear from you. So again, it's acting independently, it's acting knowledgeably, it's being informed, and then making a recommendation to council. If you are doing all those things, if you are educating yourself and truly giving them a considered recommendation, then you've done everything that can be asked for. So that is the role of boards and commissions. Again, look to the code description, look to the charter. They will tell you what your actual role is. You will understand it from that, okay? It's very clear, it's very succinct in most instances. I don't know of any that leave any hanging question marks about what your role might be?
I got one.
Yes, sir. I knew you have one, Clark. If anybody was gonna do this.
No, I understand, and our role as traffic advisory is to make, recommendations for policy or ordinance. But the gray area are things like yield signs, stop signs, crosswalks that we voted on in the past to adjudicate. Because we have the public works or the police department there. Is that something that council has to vote on?
Yes. So ultimately, when we do things like change traffic laws, that all has to be done by ordinance. And so our ordinances, of course, are our city code. And those are the things that have to be in place to enforce those things. So again, if I have a stop sign, let's say I run the stop sign. If I don't have an ordinance in place, then I've run a stop sign. There's nothing I can do about it.
But do you have to have an ordinance to add a stop sign?
Yes.
So some of these don't even come to us because the police department looks at the sort of the policy and determines that.
So they look at traffic conditions and things like that to make determinations about what they're going to do. So let's say, for instance, here's just something. Let's say we built a new school. When was the last time we built a school? All right, let's say we built a new school.
Hickson added an addition.
All right, so let's say Hickson adds an addition, and we now got different traffic coming from a different place. And looking at this, we've decided we need a crosswalk with a stop sign and or a traffic line at a certain place. That would come from the police department, public works, it would be all of those things. In theory, is that something that should go through the traffic advisory board? Probably, just so that you all know what's there.
But then we vote to send it to council?
Yes, you're making a recommendation. Everything that you do is a recommendation. Nothing that you're doing is binding. The only board or commission that is binding is the Board of Adjustment, and actually Personnel Board.
You should have a crown.
Right, and personnel to a certain extent, because that doesn't go to council, it goes to the city manager, okay? So again, it's sort of an interesting, but yours is the recommendation. So you're doing all the footwork. You're doing basically all the grunt work to get us to a place where we understand what our needs are. And then it comes to council for it.
I feel like this is gonna be a good cop, bad cop, and this is the good cop that said, go do everything, be everything, learn everything. One thing though to remember is you are coming to us as council. And so for us as council, we have a strategic plan in place. We have a mission statement, we have a vision statement, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. So everything that you do should be consistent with those, or council's not gonna want to sign on. So, and I think the worst possible outcome frequently is if a board or commission spends a lot of time on working on something that council isn't really aware of or council isn't supportive of, because then everyone's mad at the end if council then says no. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about this, and I don't disagree with the word that Neil said, but remember, council is operating under a framework that includes that strategic plan, especially, as well as, the strategic plan will change over time. The mission statement, the vision statement, the DEI statement are very, very, what do I want to say?
Set in stone.
I sort of did want to say that, not entirely, but almost, yeah.
Is it appropriate for the members of the commission to ask the council liaison, do you have any input on how this fits into the various policies?
Yes, I would argue that, and Neil's nodding his head, so I feel good about my answer. Yes, and again, it just goes back to, do not assume that council member knows what reception a policy might get, but certainly they should know much more about the strategic plan than maybe the average commission member would.
So, and again, I'm really glad the mayor pointed this out, because I don't mean to say that you have a roving commission. Okay, what I do mean to say, however, is that you do have staff and you do have council liaison there for just that purpose, Debbie, is to sit down and say, these are things that fit into the plan. And again, the strategic plan itself is a very, very big plan. Okay, there's lots of things that are in play here, but it's perfectly appropriate to talk about, hey, this is an issue, where does that fit in the plan? Because it respects both your time and council. So I would not want you to start going down paths that the council isn't going to either respond to or be able to respond to. It's effective use of your time. It's working towards that plan. Now, if you saw something that you thought ought to be different, that ought to be there, or you're not sure it's there, asking your staff or council liaison is absolutely the appropriate thing to do. They're there to help.
And the other thing, and we'll get to this a little later, is the new mechanism for having a work plan and having a budget request form is going to help us get some of the things that you're thinking about working on before council, before you put the nuts and bolts behind it, or a lot of labor behind it, and council, could say this is important to us or this is not important to us. Again, you can use your time as a board or commission the way you want to, but I think it would be helpful to have that dialogue in advance. And I'm just gonna use that as a segue to how you make requests to because we have such active boards and commissions at this point in time, we've had to routinize a little bit how you get what you want in front of council. And so there are two forms that all of you have seen, and they're in the document I sent you. One is a board and commission work session or regular meeting request form. Essentially, fill this out to tell us to get on our agenda. Remember, our agendas right now, we're scheduling in November, essentially, for meetings, and even some of November's already taken up. So when you want council to consider something, can't go from your meeting to our next meeting. That's just not the cycle that we can work on. And so you're going to fill out this form, and we're going to have your council liaison present it to council and hopefully give you some feedback on whatever proposal. And once this form is received, city manager will then run it through a process where staff can take a look at it. And if they have comments, she and I will work on scheduling it appropriately with whatever, because some of them are time sensitive and some of them are not. Please always keep in mind, we do not do fast well. We just don't. That's just the nature of government. So please understand that. And when you're thinking about turnaround time, and then if you don't have ready access to the form, I hope all of you have seen it. Your council liaison and your staff liaison both have them. And so and they're in the handbook that we'll get to as well. And the last thing I might say about these is please remember that as chairs or vice chairs, you are doing this on behalf of your board or commission. You have no independent decision-making power. Just like I have no independent decision-making power. And so what you do is based out of a vote or a consensus that comes from your board or commission. So a chair who wants to say to staff, get this done for me, that's not how this process can work, largely because we need the accountability of the entire board or commission weighing in on particular proposals or requests. Any questions about how to get something in front of us?
Mayor, I was going to add a little bit to that.
Please do.
Thank you. And thanks for adding the staff component, because it's been largely left out, but please communicate with your staff liaisons as well as your council liaisons. Our hope is to get to yes on whatever the requests are. It may be possible though that there's an item that's requested to get on the agenda that may not for various reasons. And those would all be discussed with the council liaison and or full council, but it may not be right for discussion. There may be funding barriers, there just may be timing barriers, and those answers would be corresponded back with you. But just really encourage you to have those communications with the staff liaison, especially since so many of the requests that we're receiving impact budget as well. And so we're going to talk about budgets. I won't jump ahead on that.
Oh, no, that's okay. Anybody else questions?
Mayor, I have a quick question. Hi, sorry. I'd presume that if we have something in our work plan for the year, and you guys have signed off on that, that we're okay to start doing the groundwork for that. And if we are coming up with recommendations, at that point, that's when we would fill out the form to bring those recommendations to you.
Right. So you can think of the work plan as projects that have already been at least preliminarily approved by council. And certainly you all have put or almost all of you have put budget items in there. So that doesn't have to be a second round to council either. Really, the form outside of your annual report is if there's a new budget item that comes up. And, sometimes there are things to take advantage of. All right, I'm going to continue on because I think mine also is next. And we talked about this a little bit, the role of the council liaison. So the fundamental role is to have communication between your board or commission and the council. And I'm trying real hard to get our council members to think of that as not just we report whatever the board and commission said, but also try and bring some information to you about what else is going on in the city, because that will then help you understand how many other projects are ongoing in this building. So generally it's communication. We have a time every council meeting called issues and updates, and council members are to share with the rest of council what you all are working on. And I'll readily admit that some of us are better or worse at it than others, but we are making a real effort to get these reports to be frequent and at least have the issues that you're really digging into before at least mentioned to council. So for example, Julia, this morning, last night I talked about at our meeting, Crossroads Business District is thinking about a new sales tax proposal. I wanted council to hear that they're talking about that so that when it comes to council, it's not a new idea for them. And so that's that communication. I would strongly urge each of you who are chairs to put a council report on your agenda so that they can share with you what's going on. Maybe it's we have people in town this week working on the comprehensive plan. Maybe it's, we're sending new charter amendments to the voters. That will also encourage council members to share a little bit more with you about what's going on, issues in the city. And, a lot of people are interested in KVC. I told my commissions that had been postponed for a month in terms of its consideration by Plan Commission. So any questions about the role of the liaison, the council liaison? One of the things that I have had this conversation with council and I will continue is to have council try and part of their role to remind you about the strategic plan and the mission statement, the vision statement, so that when new things are coming up, it may be as simple as asking the question, how do you think this conforms with those? So we will try and get council liaisons to do a little bit more of that over the upcoming year. I feel like now I'm just talking. It's like in short American government on the first day, all of a sudden. I'm just going to move on then to reports and budget requests to city council. So last year was our tryout. Is everyone familiar with that process? Most of you participated in it. Board of Adjustment did not, again, because we have absolutely no authority over you.
And we have no projects.
So the idea is we had in place for a while that every board and commission would come to a work session and tell us a little bit about what they were doing, maybe get some feedback from council. It wasn't working very well. But we still needed a mechanism for regular reports to council about what different boards and commissions were working on. So last year during the course of the budget process, Dr. Peoples, and I don't think Mr. Peterson's here in the room, put together this form for different boards and commissions to fill out that included your budget request. It included a statement that you needed to make about how your request conformed with our strategic plan. And then it also asked for a work plan for the year. What kinds of things are you working on? And I will say, as a first time out, as you would expect in the first time out, there was a huge variety of level of detail. And I think this year we're going to ask you to get a little more detailed and ask you to spend a little bit more time with your boards and commissions on it, so that it really does serve as a conversation with council about, here are the 3 or 4 things that we really want to hit this year. Is this something that council is open to? Because council then can hear your report, look at your report, and then this year you got a very brief letter to me because everybody said yay to everything, and tell you what it is that council's thinking about what you proposed. And I think we didn't pay much attention to how things corresponded with the strategic plan this time around, in part because it was a pretty new strategic plan, I think. But this time, I think there'll be a lot more attention paid to that. So I would encourage you all to think about that and really begin talking to your commissions early in the year about what that work plan might look like, because it will have to be submitted by probably the beginning of March.
Yeah, at the latest.
At the latest, yeah. Are there questions about that annual report and work plan? We'll try and give you some more detailed instructions this time too, and have both the staff liaison and the council liaison a little bit better prepared to help you work your way through it. All right, now it's time for me to stop talking because Dr. Peoples has an agenda item.
Right. So, and thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your participation in the boards and commissions and in this process. And we're learning as we go along as Mayor Arnold shared, the board and commission's forms and processes are fairly new, so we're working through it. But also she shared, we have 60 boards and commissions initiatives. That's a lot. And with only 28 of them aligning with the strategic plan, that provides some challenges. And so we're starting to dig into that. And of those other ones, it's important to recognize how many nuances there are. There's a lot of boards and commissions working on similar projects. And so we're trying to figure out as we go through this process, how do we perhaps align some of those so that there's not so many initiatives. But the staff time, that really is important. We have a very lean staff. And in addition to boards and commissions, staff also have their daily jobs. And they have a lot of things to do in terms of supporting city operations and working with residents on a daily basis. So I ask that you all keep that in mind. And the way that you can help do that is, as your chair and vice chairs, really work with your staff liaison as well as the council liaison. Make sure that even if it's those subcommittee meetings, that stuff is getting reported back, and so that staff can give some accurate information on times. If you're making requests, whether it's from TAC or others, often that involves, I'll just use Traffic Advisory Commission again, it may involve a traffic study. Those don't happen overnight, and it includes several departments to make something happen. And many of the boards and commissions, while you may have one primary department liaison, staff liaison, I mean, usually there's other departments that are involved behind the scenes. So we're trying to get things done quickly as possible, but just we recognize that there's some competing interests and barriers with that as well. Most importantly, and I think I said earlier, we always try to get to yes, but just please recognize we do have some hard limitations in terms of budget, staff, and there are just some things that we cannot do. It doesn't mean it's not important. It's all important. And, you know, no doesn't always mean no forever. It may just be that point in time, and that we can look at incorporating it into a plan the following year. So, yes, ma'am.
If there are, say, 3 boards or commissions that have similar ideas in mind, is there some mechanism within the city government that would say, hey, Sustainability Commission, historic preservation is thinking about this and there's overlap there? Is there some mechanism that would help keep us in touch with other commissions are doing and maybe collaborate to cut down on your number of proposals and all work together?
You were thinking like me. So there's not at this moment. We really just came to that 60 number that we're using within the last couple of weeks as we've been able to just get with staff and figure out, okay, what is each board and commission working on? So that really is part of our next steps to do that in a more formal process. The informal process is through council liaisons. That gets to the council updates that they're giving each other and during the council meetings to really bring back what each commission's working on so we can start creating some of those alignments.
We have in the past also used working groups. I mean, Green Space Advisory Commission and Sustainability have. And I know HPC is now thinking a little bit about some sustainability things as well. So we can put ad hoc working groups together as well that are made up of members of different boards and commissions. I know at one time as well, there was some discussion of maybe it was one member of Green Space going to sustainability and just having a little bit of overlap when they knew that they were doing things together. And to be honest, as we finish up the comprehensive planning process and we're thinking about the implementation of the comprehensive plan, I think there are going to be a lot of things that will overlap between lots of commissions. And I think your point is well taken. We're going to have to figure out how to put some groups together so that people are not repeating the same kind of research or coming up, I hope not, but with competing proposals or slightly different proposals because they didn't know the other person was doing this. Tammy.
Yeah, it would be really great if there is a way to do that digitally, like electronically, like if it was in our business, we would have a shared Google Doc. Where we could all look in there, we could all put comments or, add or edit or something. And that way we could all just kind of like see maybe what each other is up to. And I'm not sure who would update it, but
Thank you. Your point is well received. I think to a degree, we have that, like the work plans that each of the boards and commissions put forth. Those are all public information. It's all on our budget page. You guys, if you're curious what another commission's doing, please take a look. And that's also something, ask your staff liaison, ask your council liaison. But as we improve the process, yes, we can probably start doing some things like that and won't restart the Sunshine Commission. But Google Docs are very complicated for us to do
Right,
Sunshine Commission and then make it a
I knew what you
commission.
meant.
Which maybe should be a commission, but Google Docs are difficult for us to work on because it's hard to preserve that original record. People are adding, deleting, making decisions.
Sure.
But yes, we're trying to come up with some common ways so that we can have all of the initiatives.
But I think the point, you mentioned work plans, but we didn't push out work plans to other boards or commissions this time. And we certainly can come up with a universal document
Yep.
so that people can look at, and it doesn't have to be everyone's individual work plan. It can be one document that says, here are the initiatives of all the boards and commissions for this year.
If we can start working together, it might help us preserve our small budgets as boards and commissions if we can combine resources with other boards and commissions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, don't let this be a barrier. If there is a other commission that you want to work with, and that is not a problem within itself. We can have some cross meetings, get some cross groups together. It's just how we've been keep everyone informed and make sure we're aligning with the strategic plan.
Right, all right, we're almost to the end here. You received last night a copy of the brand new, hot off the presses Board and Commission Handbook. So this is now on the Board and Commission's page of the city website. The nice thing about the electronic version is all the links are live there, so you can go to documents and some of the sources that were used to put this together. I want to highlight a couple of things out of it, but before I do, the question always becomes, do people want paper copies of such a thing, or do we want to stick with digital copies? So one of the things I would ask you all to do is just think about that. We're not going to, as a matter of course, just print out a bunch of paper copies. But if you want to make requests of us, talk to your staff or council liaison and just let us know how many people on your board or commission might want a paper copy. And then we'll get those produced and distributed. But we certainly just don't want to have a stack hanging around that gets thrown in somebody's file cabinet somewhere and never used. So that's my first caveat. There's a lot in here. I don't know. I know at least one of you had a chance to look at it because I was pleasantly surprised to hear about that this morning. And there are a couple of different things that I'll highlight here for you. All the processes that we have talked about today are in here. The definition of the staff liaison, the definition of the council liaison, some basic sunshine law information, some links to more specific sunshine laws. What we haven't really talked about is the conduct of meetings. And I will say, by and large, our meetings are, I think, very civilized and civil, and but not all the time. And so there's some things in here also that you as chairs and vice chairs might want to take a look at. You might want to review with your board or commission. It just as a way to remind people that, number one, none of this is personal. I mean, I think we have to always remember that. And we are all speaking on behalf of the residents or the businesses of Webster Groves, and that we should be discussing ideas, not people. But there's some tools in here that might be helpful for your board or commission if you feel like that's something that you need to do. I'm going to ask you to put this as an agenda item on your next commission meeting, just as an announcement that it's available, and that way we can provide the link at the next commission meeting, except of course for the adjustments, because again, I can't ask you to do anything. And so people can do that. And then it's also a very good resource when you're trying to recruit people to your boards or commissions, because people never really know what are they getting into. And this will help them with some structure of thinking about that. And I will say, if you see this and there is something that's missing, or there's an error, all errors are my responsibility. I'll just say that, but and all omissions are as well, but please let me know, because we want to make this as helpful as possible to people, because we appreciate your service, and we appreciate people even just thinking about serving on the board or commission, because as Neil very rightly put it, you all tell us what we should be thinking about working on in ways that we can't do ourselves necessarily. All right.
I did have.
Yes, Tony.
Um, I thought the handbook was very well done, very well appreciated, and it covered a lot of things. Could you include the names of some of the members of some of the commissions? Because if I were someone that was thinking about being on a board or commission, maybe you might know somebody on one of those boards or commissions that you would want to contact directly to. And I know those change, but if you could have either a chair or a vice chair's contact information, that would be helpful.
Thanks, Tony. We have started to put membership lists on the individual pages. So we will at least point them in that direction with the handbook.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question about unexcused absences or excused absences. What constitutes an excused absence?
So it's funny that you say this because we just had this long conversation with council because the compensation charter amendment talks about that as well. We don't have a strict definition. I think we've left that up to the discernment of the board or commission itself. And typically that means notice.
We've struggled with having a quorum.
Yeah.
And because state statute says we have to have at least 4 to conduct business.
Right.
And 5's a full board. People don't like to come unless they're before a full board. And we've had to cancel the last 2 meetings because we didn't have, even with 2 alternates, we couldn't get 5 members at a meeting. And we have one individual who just, is never available.
So remember also though that 4 is sort of the starting point, right? If they're more than 4 and you still consider them excused, in terms of council, tell me if I'm wrong, we can remove anyone for almost any reason.
Right.
We
Well,
don't
because
want to
we
do that.
remove them.
I know, I
We have
understand.
another-
We need someone waiting in the
Right,
wings.
right.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes we wait
Yeah,
and a person who says they're coming doesn't come.
Yeah.
right, right.
And how many times does that have to happen?
Well, that's an unexcused absence. And so under those circumstances, if that's happening and council is notified of the fact that that's happening, then they have the authority to remove the member.
So for those of you who haven't looked at, there's a whole section on removal. There's also a section on appointment too, so it's not just the taking off. Yes, Tammy.
Again, I'm thinking of this in terms of like our business experience. So we give out an employee handbook. And inevitably things come up and you're like, well, it's in the employee handbook. So my question is, like, we've considered having like a sheet where somebody like just signs and says, I've received the employee handbook. I've had the opportunity to ask any questions now. If I have any questions in the future, this is the person that I would, I would ask. That if you would want to consider anything like this, or whether you're just going to like assume that everybody reads that.
So it's interesting you mentioned that. I don't know that we should go back to every boards and commission current member, but part of the process, as I see it now, is when you become a new member, you will get a copy of this, and we will then ask for some acknowledgement from you that you have received it and that you have taken a look at it.
Would it be as simple as like a DocuSign? So then they have the copy of the.
Well, I'm gonna let the city clerk, because it'll be her job, work out the logistics of that, because she's way better at that than I am. But yes, there will be an acknowledgement that you have this, and this is guiding policy for you as a member. All right, I have one additional item that didn't make it on the agenda. Sorry, I'm having trouble thinking of words today. And that is, some of you have secretaries as part of your board or commission that takes the minutes. Some of you do not. We're running into sometimes a little problem with staff time when staff is trying to follow what they're supposed to follow up on, run the Zoom in the meeting, and also then take the minutes. So for those of you who don't have secretaries, and it is conceivable that you can. So we know Board of Adjustment will not, because we need an official. Plan Commission is the same, that we have somebody there, but we'd like for you to have someone besides staff serve as secretary to put together those minutes. And because all of our meetings are recorded now and posted publicly, we're moving toward more of an action decision format for minutes rather than someone said this and someone said that. And we can certainly, anyone who has a secretary who wants that template for minutes, we can certainly provide it to them. And a good example, I know the Police Community Engagement Board uses that format in their minutes right now as well. So if you could please work on that a little bit over the next meeting or two to try and find somebody who can do that. And now, whatever, I know I promised an hour. I usually keep my promises. Does anybody have any other things that they would like to ask about, mention?
Zoom continues to be an option for all boards and commissions, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that is a legitimate attendance at the meeting.
It is.
It is,
If you
yes.
sign on as
It
board.
is.
Yes.
And we're publishing all the meetings as Zoom meetings. So if somebody wants to watch, it's there. If someone is a board or commission member and they cannot appear in person, they can attend as, what do we call them when they're on the Zoom meeting? They're a panel. They're a panelist, okay? Then under those circumstances, again, they can participate. That's one thing that the pandemic has done for us.
They do have to be on camera though, right? So that we know that that's
Can't just be a
that's the person.
Right. Can't just be a picture.
Okay.
So don't do it in your bathroom.
Or have a cute.
Other questions?
I really meant that for Tom rather than.
I guess I should have asked what there.
I got a doctor's appointment.
So before we break up, take some pizza with you. I'm sure there's some out there still. But fundamentally, the most important thing today is thank you. I know that you all put in a significant amount of time and energy and thought and give your talent to many people here in Webster Groves, and often people don't know that. Please know that I know that, council members know that, and everyone inside this building understands that this is a choice you make for the benefit of others, and I am just very grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I want to thank all the staff that we work with and really appreciate all the hard work.
Yeah, they are.
I'm Janice Sealy.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Bill, you online, goodbye.
I'll see you next month.
Yeah.
That one porch and.